Hi, thanks for tuning in to our Practical Nerds weekly podcast. I'm Shub, and together with my partner and co host Patrick, we normally invest in founders in design, construction, renovation, and logistics technology. Many of our friends in the ecosystem wanted us to start a podcast on the built world, and in return, we decided to honor their request with a show about nothing at all. Patrick, how are you doing? Good to see you again, man.
Good to see you. I'm a stay-at-home dog dad this week, which is
Uh
why
huh.
I'm occasionally looking down here. That the little one is fine because my wife has better things to do this week than doing what now I have to do. But it's fun. I hope you're okay too.
I'm good. Just admiring your fancy camera setup from the other side.
It's pretty cool. We have to get you one of these, but so for the video viewers, I now have one of these gimbal cameras that auto track your movement. You can set it to some epileptic speed, man. I have the slowest speed of tracking now, but when you set it to the fastest tracking speed, it gives you like whirlwind
Uh huh.
type impressions. But yeah, it's pretty fun. It was important for me to have that because our our video post-processing crew told me, hey, you're leaning back so much, your face is hardly in the picture. So problem solved. I can lean all the way back now.
Okay, that was nice. Subtle but nice. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Right, sir. So you had an interesting topic you wanted us to dig into for this discussion.
Yeah, so I was tagged by Amy Bunce at Autodesk. I hope I pronounced Amy's name correctly. Um, this week where she had picked up something that I had said before, and I thought it was worth elaborating on here. I don't know if she liked it or not liked it, but it seemed to have resonated as a thought with her, and that was the topic around AI versus authoring tools, AI versus systems of record, AI versus data infrastructure companies. And so that's what you and I are gonna talk about is our investment taste.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as a caveat, Shub, as I launch us off here, we're not saying, hey, AI isn't worth investing in. We're not saying that's, or at least we're not saying that generally. Case by case, sometimes we might say that. We're also not saying, hey, we know exactly the outcome of this world. We know exactly how every single company is playing out. We don't, of course not. That would be a silly implication. Um, we're strictly going to speak about investment taste, just what our taste is like. For in the end, we have to make prioritization decisions, can't do everything. And so this whole episode is just a reflection of taste rather than absolute success or lack of success kind of predictions. So
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly not what it is. So let me launch us off, Shub, maybe with context here. And a lot of this is a no shit Sherlock type of obvious context. Since early 2022, the world of AI feature companies has exploded. Some of them are rappers, some of them have other ways how to um, use a more foundational type of AI in order to embed it into a business. But eventually, a large number of companies out there could be classified as something that I would call an AI feature company. Now, what the future will show, and future historians, in hindsight, will be able to judge is, hey, which of these companies have compounded over time so that eventually they were not one AI feature company anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them will, right? Some of them will. Many of them won't. But there's a class of companies within AEC, architecture, engineering, and construction, that are not AI feature companies today, but that might be multiple AI feature companies in the future. So go the opposite direction in a way. And that is what I call the data infrastructure companies, the systems of record, the authoring tools, the ERPs, the ERP migrators, and the process miners. We can walk through any and all of these. But the thesis that I've been positing that Amy resonated with was, hey, and Shub, then I'm gonna give the mic to you. in the end, it's extremely unlikely that the first version that is AI generated of anything, be it a 2D geometry, a 3D geometry, a flat type of extensive document. I'm not talking of, one-page letter or an email here. I'm talking about extensive construction documents, that the first version of that will be the final version. It's extremely unlikely. It's much more probable that the first version will need constant iteration to get to the final result. Why? Because the way AI works today is a statistical approach through mathematical vectors. And with that, I cannot today manipulate through semantics or other type of input format the statistical outcome in a way that it gets me exactly what I'm asking for. It's just going to give me a probability representation of one possible outcome of what I could have meant. That means that it's exceptionally likely that several aspects of this very complex type of document that I want to create, I want to edit after the first version. And herein comes the thesis. Is that editing, that further manipulation, better done through further prompting, which will create further statistical probabilities? Or is it at some point of the iteration process more effectively done through a different kind of interface and process that is not prompting? So in an authoring tool for engineers or architects, designers, that would be your polygonal or voxel-based editing interface, meshes. In, let's say, creating extensive construction documents, it will probably be your word editor. In a numerical or quantitative scenario, it will most likely be something equivalent to a spreadsheet, right? So at some point in my thesis, you're going to have to come to a point where you manipulate what's generated to a highly deterministic and specific outcome, where it's not about probabilities anymore, but it's about being deterministic. And my thesis is that that point always comes in complex construction documents. It always comes relatively quickly. And then it is most effectively manipulated through an interface that is not a prompt, that is asking or prompting for more probability-led outcomes. And that will then always happen, eventually be exported, embedded, or happen within the authoring tools, the data infrastructure, ERP, or system of record, or those that process mine these or that migrate these. So that's the thesis, and we'll touch upon that as we go in this episode, informed our investment taste. So how does that resonate with you when you hear me say that?
I mean, look, I can't find too many things to disagree with you on. I guess first to respond to where you started, I think just framing it as it is, AI versus something else. And again, this is not to say, as you rightly said, we are for AI or against AI, but so to give you an example, I don't know how many of our viewers are aware of this. About 10, 15 years ago, maybe a little bit earlier as well, it used to be common back then if you would visit VC websites of VCs and go through their portfolio or go through their areas of interest. One of the sections back then would be either internet or consumer internet, right? Just pause and reflect on that now. If someone were to tell you today, hey, I'm looking at the internet, right, as an investment opportunity, right? Would that make sense, or would that give you any further idea or insight into what that opportunity even represents? Because the world we live in today, can you think of any company not being an internet company in some shape or form?
None of the relevant ones, yeah.
Correct. So the way I think of it is that if your thesis is, hey, internet, your thesis was was internet that doesn't inform you any further about the specific opportunity or the specificity of implementation or how you embed yourself in the workflows and so on. I personally think I see AI quite similarly in the current phase we are in of AI, as in quite often the narrative is presented as AI is transformational, which it is, but I wonder if the direction that it's going in, it's kind of like it becomes table stakes for all companies, the incumbents as well as new ones, to participate, and the winners will eventually be enablers, distributors, etc. Maybe one or two will be also win for other reasons, but playing in the field of AI by itself is not increasing your probability of winning, in my view, at least as of where we stand today in the current phase of technology adoption.
It reminds me of, hey, I have a website.
Exactly. Actually, that communicates my point even more succinctly. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, look, in terms of the other things you said, and I think I think you are way better informed about this than I am, so I better not try to communicate my stupidity or lack of being well informed by saying more than that. Look, I think the way I think eventually gain mastery over a specific niche or gain customer love is embedding yourself more deeply and mastering specific use cases, embedding yourself into the workflows, etc. Which may not have anything to do specifically with how you speak about AI implementations or not.
But if we're right with that thesis, Shub, then our investment taste would have at the very least two types of companies that could become that data infra SOR authoring tool ERP with embedded AI functionalities. Either you're that company today and you're adding more and more AI functionalities, or you're an AI first challenger type of company that has some kind of journey with its customers to become data infra, ERP, SOR, and so on and so forth. There's this metaphor that Stan from Rayon shared at an event last week. Yes, I was at an event. I'm guilty as charged.
God, man.
Guilty as charged, but good to be back. But it allowed me to meet Stan again in real time, in real life. So Stan shared this metaphor, which, I mean, it's confirmation bias. It resonated with me because I interpreted it in a way that, oh my God, anyway, yeah, Stan, finally, someone says it, what I've been trying to say. So there's a good amount of confirmation bias here. But that serves a purpose too. And the metaphor is this. So Stan said, hey, AI is like the tap water coming out of your pipes in your bathroom. In the end, it's ubiquitous and it's commodity. The fact that you have tap water doesn't differentiate your bathroom from your neighbor's bathroom. It's just a given. It's required. It's also painful when it doesn't show up, right? So when it stops working, that's how ubiquitous but also important it is, but it's also a commodity. Everybody has it. But the value to get from your tap water is directly tied to the vessel you can contain it in. If you don't have a sink, or better yet, let's say a bucket, or a sink, or even better yet, a bathtub to catch and contain that water can only fulfill a very limited amount of purposes for you for a very short amount of time. What you would do with your hands is form a cup in order to do it, right? Or if you can't even do that, just basically put your head under the tap. The use of the tap water is very limited for you. You have to catch and contain it in some point. So his metaphor ended there. But for me, huge confirmation bias, because what I heard him say is, yeah, you need a vessel to actually catch all of that or contain all of that AI and apply it to something. And that's our thesis about data infra, ERP, SORs, authoring tools being the vessel that in the end will contain all of the AI and thus create the largest amount of value. So let's walk through the examples, Shub. What could be the bathtubs? So it could be ERP for construction companies. In the US, we have a dominant one for this. In Europe, a few ones that in each segment could be considered dominant. But I think also in the US and in Europe and in the East very much so, we have a ton of subsegments that don't actually have something that I would call a cloud ERP. So that's one. Two, in the design, pre-construction, computer-aided design segment, the 2D and 3D authoring tools are needed in order to manipulate geometries. Why would anyone believe that it's going to be sufficient to generate geometry with AI and never have to author on it? It baffles me if someone has that belief. It's just not likely. Which of the two is more difficult to build, the authoring tool or the AI? Don't answer that. It's obvious, right? So
are you sure it's obvious to all of our viewers and listeners?
Yeah, at least the regulars, the true regulars. Yeah,
the two regulars. Okay.
Yeah. Your mom and mine. Yeah. So that's another example. Then you can have systems of record, which, that's a very wide term, but let's say it could be your CRM, that is a system of record, catches any kind of relationships, transactions, etc. Very painful to rip out, very easy to manipulate the data that is contained. In fact, I noticed, Shub, how Altaf at Snaptrude is an authoring tool that built now a spreadsheet interface. Is that right?
That's right.
Interesting to consider, right? In this, I assume you had a little bit of, early insight here. Perhaps you had a little bit of, thoughts to share. I thought that was pretty cool when I saw it. Again, confirmation bias, though. So these are all the kinds of. These not all the kinds. These are some kinds of examples of the types of bathtubs that I'm thinking of. And so if you're building an AI company, I think eventually if you want to be a truly timeless company, this is a good opportunity to think about how can I aspire to become that. Going back to one of the two paths that I mentioned earlier, either you're that today and you're embedding the AI, either you're the bathtub today and you're embedding the AI, or you're the water and building a bathtub around you. Do you think that's possible even?
I think first things first, I love the analogy. I love the analogy of the
credit system.
So kudos, Dan. Of the tap water or the bathtub or the vessel, etc. Look, I think going with that analogy, and if it wasn't obvious to our two listeners, or hopefully more than two, which is the more challenging thing to build, the authoring solution or a AI application for it, I think the authoring solution is far more challenging. On the very last question you had, Patrick, I think, sorry if you could come again with the question you had in mind right at the end.
Do you think that's even possible? If I'm an AI first company today, can I build a bathtub around me?
I think that sequence of events of trying to build a company is far more challenging than the other way around. I think if you, more so because I think there are enough enabling blocks, ironically, more enabling blocks for you to add the AI layers post having built the bathtub, going with your analogy.
I'm recently enamored with a few hardware companies that in their specific segments seem to have an opportunity to actually build a system of record because they come with the hardware first. I struggle to imagine what an AI first, or AI software only first company would look like that builds a bathtub around it. I really struggle.
I mean, even you must have also experienced this, Patrick. So more and more companies that I meet these days, they find that the the training and the inference aspects of the learning loops in the AI models have now evolved to the point where a lot of companies, even when they're offering, uh, let's call it AI solutions, just as an oversimplification for industries, they don't actually even need to train too much data to begin with. They can sort of just, uh, kind of plug in, they can just give small sample sets to regular commercial LLMs out there, and that's good enough to sort of get going with inference models for a completely proprietary data set, which is crazy if you think about it.
I remember the 2019 times, our first year, when we looked at like computer vision type companies. And the pitch would be in those days, hey, we have a super proprietary data set. We have trained on these number of millions of data points, which didn't
Yes.
mean anything to you.
hmm
Seems like those days are over.
Yeah. It definitely feels that way. It definitely feels that way. Even in companies claiming that they need a proprietary data set to train their models, the threshold of that initial training data set seems to have gone down significantly. And if some claims are to be believed, many companies, the barriers to entry for that data set is surprisingly small. And even the training models don't even need to be proprietary in nature, actually.
Then you can have synthetic data
hmm
on top of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, what you're saying sounds to my ears like, okay, all the more reason, if I can't differentiate with that, to build a bathtub around myself. But how?
hmm
It's honestly, I look the how. It's even a poorly framed question. So it's not but how. It's hey, but why does my AI functionality allow me to build the bathtub? So of
hmm
course, someone can choose to build a bathtub the same way that a founder that starts with a bathtub can do that. That's just prioritization of
Yes.
resources. But how does the thing I'm doing today give me the advantage, the unlock, the synergy to
Yeah.
build the bathtub? So there, I'm okay. On the customer side, I'm getting track record, so that we're strong advocates of. So that part I
hmm
understand, but beyond that, I haven't seen it. I haven't seen a compelling pitch to that degree yet, I have to say.
I would have to agree with you.
Hmm.
I think the biggest block I have in my mind in making that transition is uh, I don't think, if you choose to, for your starting point to be training yourself on AI models and the like, uh, how that leads to a proprietary advantage to go and build your own bathtub. Whereas I think it's a more first principles argument to do the inverse. That is, if you have a bathtub, because you have a reservoir of water, it allows you to figure out a few different things on how you can actually infuse AI into what you're doing.
Yeah. Hmm.
By the way, I have to just pause and chuckle. I think if you were to provide the transcript of this episode and have AI recommend it, I have a feeling it'll say a few things about bathtub being what we're aiming for with this discussion.
I can live with that. That's
hmm
certainly, uh, I would find it very funny if actually for the search term bathtub, we're now showing up
hmm
for bathtub AI.
Yeah.
I think we're now owning that search term.
I mean that would be achievement unlocked for me, man.
Uh, yeah. So in my mind, so I think the ERP piece and system of record is sort of intuitive. I think the authoring tool for the architects, engineers, pre-con people is also intuitive. The data infrastructure, I think I have to elaborate a little bit on why I think that's another type of bathtub. So um, if you own the data infrastructure, typically
hmm
what you do is it's a combination. Sometimes it's only one of the things that I'm about to say, but usually it's a combination of the data pipes connecting different systems in an enterprise customer and some sort of data structure. Some call it, depends on the context. Some call it an ontology. Sometimes it's called something else. But you have sort of a data structure to it. Now, where the discussion sometimes gets prematurely lost is, yeah, but AI doesn't need data structure anymore. Actually, that is incorrect. So if you let's call it prepare. If you prepare the data better, you will also get much better statistical results, especially when it's deterministic outcomes that you want to achieve through a statistical distribution curve. So the better prepared, that's the next frontier actually in AI for enterprise applications, is better data preparation, of which the king discipline or the queen discipline is data structuring, ontology, again, in certain contexts, etc. So if you now own those two ingredients, that's limited to that. You're structuring the data and you're pushing the data from left to right. What you do before AI is essentially allowing yourself to automate certain workflows between the different systems that the systems themselves could not do. They could not do that because they hold the data in no structure at all, or a different type of structure usually. And they don't have the push from left to right to the other system. They have no way to manipulate what is happening in the other system. So you having the pipes and having the structure allows now to automate the workflows between the systems. Speckle is such an example for 3D geometric data. That's something I find very fascinating, because what is automation if not AI today, right? So at this point, someone might say, and I don't have the answer to that, but I do have a strong conviction here. Hey, but agents can do that. You don't need all the structuring. You actually don't need the integrations. They will just tap into your system back and forth. My conviction is that is just a more lazy version of the data infrastructure, and they will converge back into data infrastructure. Just it will look like an automated data infrastructure, but you will actually not get rid of the pipes. You can get rid of them, but in a more inefficient way. It's like saying, hey, I can also build a two-wheel type of vehicle, but in the end, four-wheel type of vehicles maybe still make more sense in many of the cases. So I think that's what it's going to converge back to. And so that's why I think data infrastructure is a different type of bathtub that I'm excited to see.
I would have to agree with you. So I think that is indeed the bigger opportunity. And I think that's where, so look, if you think about it, if the debate is, and that's not what you exactly said, but if you oversimplify it to the level of asking, should it be data structures and infrastructure versus agents, for example, right? As an opportunity. I would urge, some of our viewers and listeners to check out what some of the big and mega tech companies, what they've already done in the field of agentic AI. It is actually, I would say, at least for me, it was quite mind-blowing and revealing how advanced they already are in the extent to which their agents are deployed. In a lot of these applications, even though they're perceived to be slow, legacy companies, etc., it is actually very impressive work that's already happening in the extent to which agents are deployed in their existing accounts, and what the extent of revenue creation that's already happening through agents in these companies. And I think the reason I bring this up is for anyone listening who thinks agents is like the next opportunity. I would argue, hey, it's the current opportunity. In fact, it's so current that the largest companies in the world have already been on it for a year or two and are generating substantial revenue from it. So,
but what they have? They have systems of record in-house.
Exactly. So that's where I was going with this. So if you do intend to go on the agentic path, really ask yourself, do you actually have an unfair advantage compared to these very large companies if you go down the same path as they do? Therefore, I think in my mind, the path to take is the other side on the data structuring part, especially, and this comes back maybe to where we started. If you have a proprietary way of organizing the data to lead to better inferencing and so on, which, at least in my mind, and hopefully, we all share the view because of where construction tech is today, I see that as an opportunity which is, if not inaccessible, at least very difficult to access for the incumbents. And I think that is the play to make for younger companies with some sort of insights into this arena because I think that is the uncharted territory. Agent seems to me like a already very obvious opportunity out there, which is being also capitalized very effectively.
Sorry, what do you see as the uncharted territory? Can you say it in a different way?
So if you have data of these, let's call it unstructured or relatively less structured projects, industries, etc., and from which inference, the quality of modeling or inference, drawing inferences from these data sources today is constrained by the manner in which this data is structured, if that makes sense.
Well, it could.
Nice. Very nice.
I see. I had a founder pitch me an agentic framework for infrastructure. Sorry, by that I mean real world infrastructure,
Okay.
highway building, grid lines, bridges, tunnels, and so on. And I asked him, hey, the way you're pitching this sounds awfully lot like what UiPath would pitch their customers today. Why can UiPath not do that? And I think the founder didn't have a good argument. He did have a argument, to be fair. And the argument was, hey, UiPath customers find it very cumbersome to maintain the UiPath workflows. That is correct. I can confirm that anecdotally from the customers that I know that have deployed UiPath. But then I asked him, hey, why will your agents not need maintenance? There was no answer. There was literally, I hadn't thought about it that way. Because the underlying systems change. You know, UiPath doesn't need to be maintained because UiPath is updating its software. It's because the customer is updating its software. The same thing will happen to the agent, right? So maybe there's a greater interface. Maybe there's better designed product than UiPath. Those would be fair answers, although I would not deem them my investment taste. They would be sort of answers that can allow you to deal with that problem in an effective way. But you're exposed to the same underlying problem. And so that means that it's actually the system of record, the ERP, the data infrastructure that is so valuable to own and that eventually will embed the agents. That's at least my firm conviction and hence my investment taste, what I look for in AEC software more than an AI first company.
And I think I know the answer, and I think I also know that you won't be able to share more information on this. But have you come across companies which fit this description in terms of serving as the, let's call it, new generation statement of record in construction tech? And what sort of characteristics would such companies represent?
So for authoring tools, I think there are multiple out there that are vying for that spot, and I'm hoping there's going to be more than one. For geometric data infrastructure, I found 2 or 3 that I consider high quality. For flat data infrastructure, let's say for SMB customers or SMB contractors, not really, and I'm not sure there's much needed there. I don't know yet. For the construction execution phase of enterprise general contractors, look, in the US, Procore is the incumbent that you would have to say, hey, why do you need me on top of that?
Yeah.
In Europe, there's, in my opinion, none like that. In Asia, Shub.
I think if by Asia you mean ex-China, I think there's none. If you mean within China, I mean, anecdotally and from the outside in, we've heard great things about Glodon, which does quite a few other things as well, including BIM and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Japan, maybe EndPad.
Perhaps, yeah.
Perhaps we don't really have much visibility into the Japanese market. Then when it comes to the pre-construction stage of enterprise general contractors, yep, I have seen one that I liked a lot, that I think has the aspiration to be that. And I'm sure there are going to be others. And then perhaps the CRM in, let's say, the early stages, Salesforce perhaps, but perhaps there's also an opportunity to build on top of Salesforce something that is a different type of, or an added type of system of record.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you go through these, and I'm skipping a ton here, but if you go through the different types of opportunities, I do think it's actually still an let's say, relatively open playing field.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way.
Yeah. And Asia ex China, I think that playing field, I mean, it's difficult to monetize it, but the playing field in terms of the being that type of a player, to me, seems wide open, no?
It is. I mean, we do have one such company in our portfolio, which, in a subset of the region is in fact the largest player. Yeah, but you're right. In terms of the gap existing, etc., and being proven out across the whole continent or across the region, that gap still remains wide open.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So anyone building that, hit us up. You now know our taste.
Are you sure they should hit us up and not just you?
No, I mean, if that depends on the region, right? So
Okay.
you'll have to deal with it if it's Asia, man. APAC to be specific, or Africa.
Yes. Or Africa. Yes.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks for the discussion. Shout out to Amy Bunzel here at Autodesk. That was a good trigger to reiterate the message here on Practical Nerds.
Excellent. Nice discussion, sir. I'll see you soon for the next one.
See you soon. Ciao.
See you.